welcome back to my channel. Welcome to an unseasonably beautiful day in January. I am in Missouri in zone 6A, and it was so nice outside today. I decided to come outside and get some much needed work done. So my garden, this is my second year here, first chance to have a garden. First time we had enough trees down that I could actually have some sun. And so my garden runs 22 feet this way and 20 feet back. I have enough space in here for 3 raised garden beds with 2-foot paths in between the beds. So what I want to talk to you about today is that if you were watching my channel last year, you remember that I borrowed this idea from another lady's channel that I watched, where she was burying PVC pipe in her garden with holes drilled in it, and she was just sort of shoving her kitchen scraps down in that PVC. Well, I decided to try the same thing, but I wanted a wide mouth container, and so I just drilled big holes in a coffee container, buried it in my flower bed, put some kitchen scraps in it and some leaves, and I would leave it for a few days and it would become compost, and then I could top dress my flowers with that compost and then start over. And I only had 1 container buried, and it was working out beautifully. And so I'd like to do that in this garden the same way. This is a no-till garden. We're just putting down a layer of compost. I'm fortunate, I have bunnies, and rabbit manure is wonderful for a garden because it's considered a cold manure and I don't have to let it compost. I can just put it straight on the ground. And when it's mixed with straw, it's already a beautiful blend of nitrogen and carbon. Now what I want to do is invite earthworms in on an epic scale. And so everybody has pretty much an abundance of earthworms under the soil at any given time. Right now they're down there sleeping, but when they wake up in the spring, I want to invite them not only to stay here, but I want them to invite their friends. This is going to become an earthworm free-for-all here, and that's exactly what you want in your garden soil. Earthworms, as you know, they go up and down and back and forth, and they aerate the soil, and then they consume all these little tidbits that are laying on top, and then they take it back down with them, and their castings are amazing, and then they allow these microbes to develop, and those microbes are all over. It's like a song and dance of nature underground, and it's perfect for growing veggies. So yes, you want to invite earthworms in. And so I'm one of those gardeners. I want to work smarter, not harder. So instead of building an off-site compost bin that I would have to try and, pitchfork and turn myself, I decided that I like this idea. I want to go with this again, but on a larger scale this time. So I was outside and I had 1 tree and several shrubs that I needed to still pull up here because I've got this side of the garden pretty much a pretty thick layer of mulch on it already, and this side I'm just starting to clear and work on. So I had to pull this big old mamma jamma tree out all by myself. Took me about 45 minutes, but I got it out of there. But it left a beautiful hole, and so I'm going to bury some buckets in my garden this year, and I'm going to try composting in ground again on a much larger scale. And so what the idea is that, and before I go on, let me interrupt myself and say that I plan to use food grade buckets, because everything I read about regular buckets is there could just be any kind of plastic in a regular bucket, and you really don't want those chemicals leaching out through your compost, because compost is always growing and developing and gets mushy and gets dry, and you stir it up and it's always leaching out stuff, and you really don't want it to carry chemicals across your garden bed. So get yourself a nice food grade bucket if you want to try this. They're not really that expensive. And then get yourself a drill bit and drill a bunch of holes, and I mean big holes, because you want the earthworms to be able to freely move about, because you want them to come in and eat your garbage, your kitchen scraps, your leaves, your carbons and your nitrogens. You want them to eat and you want them to live in here. But if you get a good heavy rain or something and they need to make an escape, they can. You also, when you do get a lot of rain, you want that water to be able to leach out, even though you might have a lid on it like I plan to put on mine, and even a rock on top of that to keep critters out. You still don't want the chemicals. This is very leaky, and of course those chemicals are just going to leach right on out, and that's the last thing that you want in your garden since you're gardening for your health. So if you want to try this, I definitely suggest getting a food grade bucket, and you can start with 1 bucket. However, the idea is that compost doesn't happen overnight. So as you fill this up with scraps, and handfuls of leaves or whatever you're going to use for your carbon, and you're stirring it occasionally and you're putting the lid on. Eventually it is going to get pretty full and pretty tight in there. So you're going to need to put the lid on bucket number 1, leave it, and then move on to a second bucket. That's what I hope to do. In fact, in my pathways, since I'll have 3 raised garden beds and 2-foot paths in between, I should have enough room for 4 buckets. All right, guys, that's all I wanted to talk to you about today, was inviting earthworms to not only live in your garden, but to invite their friends, and then you guys can just become earthworm ranchers like I plan to be. All right, guys, thanks for sticking with me. Hopefully you're enjoying some beautiful, beautiful weather too right now. Love and light. Blessed be.